everybody. Hope all are well. Hope somebody is listening today. This is Bev, and it is 3rd of April already, Friday, and we are on chapter 12 of The Reaper and the Scribe. Thanks for joining me. Hope everybody's doing okay and keeping themselves busy and staying safe. Paul's having a nice nap. So, I'm going to start, and thanks for coming again. Doris had tied Alicia's hair back, and the 21st century girl stood there in a long vest, and in that simplicity, she looked as pretty as a picture. "Now then," said Albert, "look at you, standing there like a princess. Come and give your old dad a kiss." "Thank you, kind sir," she said, giving him a curtsy and planting a kiss on his cheek. Jamie put his arms around her and asked, "Is it really you?" "Oh, I do hope so, Jamie. There is so much to put right when I get back home. That being said, this feels more like home than our mansion ever did, and I now know why you shunned it. I'm also thinking of all the nasty things I've called Freddie Chambers," she said. "Don't worry too much over Freddie. He's had one or two names for you, too," laughed Jamie. "Yeah, but he had good cause to call me names. I did not. I scorned him because he wasn't rich," said Alicia. "Freddie Chambers, did you say?" inquired Albert. "He has been in my mind a lot since you two arrived." "How so, Albert? Freddie Chambers is my closest friend in the 21st century," exclaimed Jamie. "He may be, lad, but Alice had a friend called Freddie Chambers when she was a young'un. Inseparable they were, and they did everything together. She was only 4 or 5 and won't remember him now, but there was something about that lad. He was like a bean-pole, tall and thin as I recall. But why should I remember him now? I've no idea. He's been dead for years," said Albert. "Oh, that's sad, Albert. How did he die?" Alicia asked. "Diphtheria got him when he was 6. Him and a lot of others, as I recall. We lost 2 of ours to the same thing," Albert answered. "You have lost 2 of your children, Albert?" asked Alicia, her eyes beginning to well up again. "2 during that time, but all told, we've lost 5. 3 at childbirth, and the other 2 I just told you about." Albert sighed. Alicia struggled to think how these people dealt with the life they had, and how steadfast in their happiness they were. The realization was to Alicia that money really was the root of all evil. Again, thoughts of her father, without the love or respect of a daughter, intruded. He wasn't a rich man at all, although he was the wealthiest person Alicia had ever met. When it came to receiving love, her father was a pauper. He worked just as hard as Albert, his working hours just as long, yet he never indulged himself with any luxuries. Luxuries were lavished upon his wife and daughter, mostly without his knowledge. Alicia's father was a very poor man indeed, and Albert, he was a rich man with the love of an entire family. Now that she had sorted that out, her head became clearer, her future path becoming set in her mind. Jamie, however, was in a thoughtful mood. The coincidence of Alice's friend's name turning over and over in his mind. Was there a link? He couldn't rule it out because he was already in the middle of an impossible scenario. Surely anything was possible, so why was the question. The thought that entered Jamie's mind was, had his long-term friendship been made solely to get him to this point in life at this specific time? If so, for what reason? Was it a reason to be dealt with in this century or in the 21st? Or could it be both centuries? His concentration was broken by the voice of his sister. "Penny for him?" she asked. "As if you would bother with a penny," answered Jamie. The two siblings laughed simultaneously as the mood in the room grew lighter. "Right then, that's enough sad talk. There's no wage for turning over old stones," said Albert, as he removed from a little cupboard an old squeeze box and began to play a tune. Doris began to sing along, and young James began to clap his hands. The whole mood lifted to the tapping of Albert's foot. After a while, Alicia said she was going topside for a little fresh air. Once there, she noticed the sky was clear. They were moored just outside the smog of Leeds. The stars were beautiful on that crisp winter's evening, and as she looked at them, her mind wondered, was anyone she knew looking at these same stars in her time? Did anyone miss her? Unfortunately, she knew the answer to that last question, and it made her very sad. The next day started in the usual way, with Doris and Alicia rising first. Alicia went straight outside to collect some kindling, and was pleased to see that it hadn't been as cold, so hopefully there would be no bad surprises for her that morning. There were no such horrors, but there was a woman walking up the towpath towards her. "Good morning, me dearie," said the woman in rags. Alicia noticed she was carrying a small child. "Good morning," she answered. "You have a kind face," said the woman. "I haven't eaten in days. Could you spare something for the baby and me?" she uttered. Alicia was shocked at how thin they both were. "I don't have anything, I'm sorry." Alicia looked down at her finger at a piece of jewelry and said, "Ooh, I do have this," tugging off her finger the ring her mother had given her for her 18th birthday. It was a family heirloom and had belonged originally to her great-great-great-great-grandmother, who had passed it down through a procession of female family members. The woman took it from her and asked, "Do I know you? Your face, it seems familiar to me." "I don't think so. I'm not from around here. I'm just visiting," Alicia replied. "Maybe this ring might change my luck. I will keep it forever. There is something strangely familiar about you, as if Mother Nature herself had picked you out to meet me. I think you might be my guardian angel. Yes, that's what you are, with your kind face and helpful ways. Thank you ever so much," said the thin little lady as she scurried off. Alicia was moved by what had just transpired, and on the way back to the barge, she thought back to her 18th birthday and the conversation she had had with her mother. Then Doris shouted her name. "Yes, Doris, I'm here," she shouted back. "What did she want? The common prostitute?" asked Doris. "She wanted to know if I had any food. I told her I had none." "Good. She's a good-for-nothing strumpet. Did she ask you to take the child?" "No. Why would you ask me that?" Alicia asked, surprised. "Well, me and that woman go back a long way. I can tell you, because you will never meet Alice. Albert and I had been wed for 3 years, and still no young'un. We were beginning to think one would never come, when I met the woman you just met, 28 years ago this very week. Let's just say she had a business opportunity for me." "She sold you her baby?" marveled Alicia. "Yes, she did. She sold me that little baby for a sixpence, but no mention of this to anyone, mind. Alice is much our child as if I had borne her myself, and nothing will ever change that." Alicia put her arms around her surrogate mother and squeezed her ever so gently as she whispered in Doris's ear, "Your secret is safe with me." It was only when the 2 ladies got back to the barge and the men were fed that Alicia began thinking of her 18th birthday again, in that conversation with her mother. The conversation was about how the ring had come into the family in the first place. Her great-great-grandmother had had the ring given to her by an angel, and the ring had brought her luck. Of course, the family thought the old girl was insane, but the story had been passed down through the generations. Alicia just sat back in her chair and thought, I was that angel. She felt a shudder go through her body, but then a ripple of laughter as she realized the better than everybody Alicia, and even funnier, her mother, had descended from a common prostitute. In the 21st century, the winter sun was shining again, and 3 ordinary-looking people blended in with everyone else at Leeds City Station. 2 of them, however, grabbed hold of their rather taller companions' hands every time a train arrived. It wasn't long before the train to York pulled alongside their platform. Droves of people flooded out from the train. This was the largest crowd the Victorian siblings had ever seen, and they held onto Freddie's hands for dear life. Freddie just laughed and said, "Come on inside." Very reluctantly, they climbed into the carriage, and John steered them towards a table seat. Alice and John each grabbed a window seat. "I thought you 2 were scared," said Freddie. "It's not as noisy in here," replied Alice. John, like Alice, for the first time in his life, was sitting on a train, and his excitement gained momentum along with the train pulling out of the station. Both John and Alice sat back in their seats in shock when a voice came over the PA system giving information about their route. "It's okay, guys. It's just the guard telling us where the train will be stopping en route." After they pulled out of Leeds, the train picked up speed. The look on the 2 Victorians' faces was priceless. For 30 minutes, they kept their eyes closed all the way to York Station, and then with Freddie, exited the carriage. Unlike Leeds Station, this was the type of civil engineering that John had witnessed before along the canal with the giant warehouses. Again, the amount of people rushing past was quite frightening, as Alice and John kept themselves very close to Freddie. Upon leaving the station, John and Alice stepped into another new world. Alice said, "Look, there, John, another Kirkstall Abbey, and it isn't in ruins. The giant can't have sat on that one." "Giant?" said Freddie, with a puzzled expression. John laughed and said, "It's what my dad used to tell us whenever we passed Kirkstall Abbey. He would say, 'Look, John boy, the abbey looks like that because a giant once stopped there for a rest and sat on the roof.'" "It's true!" exclaimed Alice, sporting a pout as she crossed her arms. "I'm not too sure about that part of history to know," said a diplomatic Freddie. "It was a giant," muttered Alice as she stuck her tongue out at her brother. Soon they had followed the road around to the left and walked the short distance to the British Railway Museum. Once there, John was eager to start, but they had to wait for Freddie's friend Bob Jones to arrive at reception. "Hello, Freddie," said Bob. Freddie smiled and shook his hand. "Hello, Bob. This is John, who we spoke of." "Good morning, John. Are you ready for your guided tour?" Bob asked. While still shaking hands, John's head was nodding at a great pace. "I will leave him in your capable hands, Bob," said Freddie, as he took Alice's hand and said, "See you later, John." Both Freddie and Alice waved and left together. "Well then, John, where would you like to start?" asked Bob. "Mr. Coates told me you have a Stephenson's rocket. Can I see that one, please? I don't know what one is, but Mr. Coates told me about it, so I am quite eager to see it," he replied. "You don't know what the rocket is?" gasped Bob. "No, sir," John replied. "In that case, we shall start there. We have two, a working replica and one showing the inside workings of the engine," replied Bob, leading the way to the most famous steam locomotive in history. Outside the museum, Freddie and Alice strolled down the road and through one of the giant doorways that leads you through the great city wall. "What would you like to do first?" Freddie asked. "I don't know. I'm too excited," replied Alice. With a knowing smile, Freddie led Alice to a row of waiting horse-drawn carriages and helped her up into the first one in line. Alice clapped her hands together with glee when she sat upon the buttoned leather seat. Freddie sat alongside, and to a sound similar to what young James made for Toby, the horse effortlessly pulled away. Back in the 19th century, Alicia had been thoughtful for quite some time. When Doris said, "You're quiet, little Alice." Laughing, Alicia said, "I'm Alicia." "I don't know. It's getting even harder to tell you two apart. When you first came here, you didn't resemble her likeness at all. But then you started to smile a little, and in a certain light you looked a bit like her. But now your face seems to have changed. No, changed is the wrong word. Your face has become more relaxed, and now you and my sweet Alice are identical," mused Doris. "I think I know what you mean, Doris. I feel different. I'm not as tense. When you don't have to be better than someone else, it seems like the pressure has been taken away from you. Maybe this is the real me, and the other me was what I had been turned into. Not that I am making any excuses for myself. I was a completely spoiled bitch. It would not make sense to the old Alicia, but I am so much happier here now than I was in the future." "So, what were you thinking about?" asked Albert, as he had heard most of the conversation from the helm. "Well, I have a ring. For some reason, it is the only thing that came with me. It is a family heirloom, and I received it for my 18th birthday. My I don't know how many greats, but you know what I mean, grandmother was supposed to have been given this ring by an angel. The thing is, the woman I have just given it to looked at me very strangely and said, "You are an angel, and I will never forget your wonderful kindness." And a cold shiver went through my body, said Alicia. "Well, lass, not that I know about this sort of thing, but if it's my thoughts on the matter you want, they are this. That fine brother of yours has come here to get my John and Alice on something that's to do with this future, as you call it. You have come here to find out what happened in your past. Also, you needed to find out what is important in life, and that, my girl, is family. And a good horse." "You're right about the family, Albert, but as to the horse, I have 3 of those that I haven't even seen in over a year," said Alicia regretfully. "3 horses? Bloody hell, girl, how rich is the father?" inquired Albert. At the last count, his personal wealth was around 10 billion, she answered honestly. "I don't know what that is, but I once saw a rich man holding a sovereign," replied Albert. "To give you an idea, Albert, my father probably has more money than there is in the entire country today," quipped Alicia. "Did you hear that, Doris? Well, Alicia, your father must be a man to look up to," said Albert. "You are right, Albert. He must be. I am beginning to think he is your great-great-grandson, or something like that," Alicia said. "That could be true, lass. I could be the start of the Watson Empire," said Albert with a laugh. "The only thing is, we are called Winters," said Alicia. "'Appen that's how it was. 'Appen maybe somebody only had girls along the line," mused Doris. "You can't have a company name that's a girl's name, Doris," corrected Albert. "Not now we can't, but it sounds like we might be able to in this future we've heard about," said Doris. "Lasses running businesses, I've never heard the like," answered Albert. "In the future, Albert, there has been a lass prime minister," said Alicia. Poor Albert just shook his head and said, "Mark my words, these women will be wanting a vote soon." "Oh, I don't think you need to worry about that for another 20 years or so," comforted Alicia. The 2 ladies laughed at Albert's bemused expression as he said, "Well, I'm going topside. I can't spend the whole day talking like you women do." Again the ladies just burst into laughter. Over in Olbeck, Jamie was sweeping the factory floor when 4 young lads that worked there pulled him roughly into an adjacent stockroom and began pushing him around. The tallest one of them took hold of him by his collar and pulled it tight, saying, "So, you're the new apprentice, are you? There are 1 or 2 things you need to know. Firstly, every morning you give me your dinner, and every week you give me a penny out of your wage." "Do I just give a penny to you, or to all of you?" inquired Jamie. "Just me," said the loutish boy. Jamie took hold of the boy's hands and ripped them away from his collar. "In that case, for this business discussion, we don't need the rest of you," said Jamie, giving the 3 lads standing together a perfectly delivered roundhouse kick, connecting each one on the chin and sending them instantly to the floor, profusely bleeding. "Now, I think we will renegotiate our deal," said Jamie. The mouthy boy looked stunned. "Every morning when I walk in, you, and only you, will have a pot of tea awaiting my arrival." The boy reached back as if he was going to strike Jamie, but once again his old karate training that his father had made him take paid off with a perfectly landed punch to the jaw. The boy hit the dirt, joining his friends, who were only now coming round. They all managed to stagger to their feet, and Jamie said to the leader, "Do we have an accord?" "Yes, sir. Please don't hit me again," begged the leader. All four of them left the room dazed and bleeding. Following behind was an unscathed Jamie, who picked up his broom and carried on sweeping. The works foreman walked over to Jamie and said, "What has just taken place?" "Those young men have just let me know who is in charge, sir," replied Jamie. The foreman looked at the dazed and bleeding ruffians and said, "So I see. Carry on, young man." Jamie spent the rest of the day in the drawing office, as he had been told it needed tidying up whilst the engineer was away. This, of course, was a dream opportunity for Jamie to do some work for himself. He began surveying the plans for all the different engines they had, and sure enough, the plans for his own engine were there. It was an older engine, with the working number L123, and was no longer in production. So he hatched a plan. The drawing had everything on it that he needed to know about his old engine. He folded it up and put it in an empty metal box the size of a biscuit tin, placing it underneath his jacket. Going back downstairs, he told the foreman he had finished and asked was it okay to finish the bricklaying he had begun the other day. The foreman happily agreed, and Jamie descended the ladder into the cellar. Quickly walking to the wall he had rebuilt, he picked up the hammer and chisel that were still down there, knocked out the mortar between four of the bricks, and removed them. He then, with the chisel, split the bricks so the box would fit in the space behind them. He placed the box in the gap and put the fascias of the bricks and the mortar back in place, so it would remain there until he returned to his own time and showed Freddie his great discovery. Feeling very happy with himself, he climbed back up the ladder and into the workroom. At the National Railway Museum in York, in the 21st century, John was seeing the marvel of his age, Stephenson's rocket. Most people are pleased to see the rocket, but John looked like he was viewing the latest Ferrari. He had walked past quite a few locomotives as he strolled along with Bob Jones, but had not recognized them as steam engines. He even walked right past the Mallard and Flying Scotsman without batting an eyelid, but the sight of the rocket made him euphoric. "Do you have some paper and a pencil so I can make a drawing to show my dad?" enthused John. "I'll tell you what, as you are a friend of Freddie's, you can take a photo of it with your phone." John Watson just looked at Bob Jones and said, "I don't understand your words, sir. Phone? Photo? What are these things?" Bob Jones just scratched his head, looking very bemused, and said, "I'll get you some drawing paper." The horse and carriage ride was just as exciting for Alice as the Railway Museum was for John. "I wish this could last forever," she said. So did Freddie, but he knew with each passing day this wonderful life was drawing to a close. He could not believe how quickly someone could fall in love as he had. He felt he was the luckiest man in existence, but also the unluckiest. He knew he would have to give her up and return to his old life, which he used to think was perfect. He now knew it was not. He looked at Alice and how she was taking in everything she saw with the biggest sweet smile on her face. He realized she was building a lifetime of memories from which she could draw upon for the rest of her life. Freddie, for some reason, could not think that way. His train of thought was quite different. He had wondered for a moment if they might meet again in this life. He knew they had not already met, because not only had Alice taken his virginity, she was his first real girlfriend. So would there come a day when she might walk back into his life? He also knew she would be different, as she would have been brought up in this day and age, and her beautiful innocence would have been lost. John Watson was now very excited, pencil in hand, drawing this wonder of the age. Bob Jones had left him to it as he went outside to check on the rocket's facsimile, and just as he had thought, it was in steam. Arriving back at the cutaway version of this wondrous engine of the past, he found John finishing up his drawing. "Okay, John, I have a surprise for you," said Bob. John's face beamed with a smile as he was led outside of the museum to the full-sized replica in full steam of Stephenson's rocket. John ran towards the wonder of his age. "Well, John, what are you waiting for? Hop on and let's go for a ride." John's face lit up with the biggest smile Bob had ever seen as he leapt onto the footplate. To be standing where he was beyond his wildest dreams. He had only heard rumors of its greatness, and now he was actually standing on the footplate of what up until now had been only a dream. The blowing of a coach horn signaled the start of the journey, and John held on with all his might. The experience was exhilarating, as John was at last where he wanted to be. He was riding the future, in the future, and he knew nothing would ever be the same again.